Welcome to another episode of Shots from the Winchester podcast, where we explore leadership topics from a variety of perspectives. This podcast is brought to you by Greencastle Consulting, your nation's premier strategy execution firm. Orlando, what was that now? You guys were...
It was a change utility conference.
Okay.
So they run it once a year. A bunch of utilities get invited. This was hosted by Orlando Utility Commission, which we signed an MSA with a few months ago. We went down there to kind of network and build relationships with some of the decision makers down there where they need help the most. And it was a great experience. Yeah, we got to know.
Great trip, made some great people, and the weather wasn't bad to boot.
I would imagine.
Get a break from the cold spell up here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I definitely want to dive into like some of the ins and outs of how you guys handle not just corporate relationships, but just relationship building in general. But I think one of the questions that always strikes me, you guys come off as naturals at it.
Yeah.
Is it always been that way? Or was it like a skill you developed, or like you just had the gift of gab?
It's still not that way.
Well, you're better than a lot of
Fake it
people I
till you
know. Yeah.
Just keep faking it.
Yeah, I'm an introvert pretending to be an extrovert.
Yeah.
No, I mean, for me, it was I went to a lot of different schools growing up. I lived in a lot of different places growing up. So we moved every 6 months or so for a majority of my childhood. So for me, it was everywhere I went, I had to make new friends. I didn't. It was before the days of the internet and social media and all that. So you would go to a new school, a new house. You'd have new neighbors. You'd have new schoolmates. So I'd always have to make new friends. So the only way to do that is to become an extrovert, right? And just become very, very self-aware of how you come off to other people to make friends quickly. Because, especially as a kid in school, you want to make sure that you're making friends quickly, to get that group, together and just doing it over and over and over, and then the Army, all that. You're always going to different units, meeting new people. People are coming and going. You're having to get to know people, which is a skill you develop. Veterans especially develop that quickly because of the dynamic environment that you're in. Constantly, it's always changing.
You have to communicate.
Yeah, it's always changing. So you gotta kind of learn how to do it that way.
Yeah,
it's interesting because I agree with you. There's I think veterans, at least in my experience, are more coachable in that sense, but it's very different communication styles when you're talking about like relationship management versus like clearly communicating task and intent.
Yeah,
like there's a game to be played. It's like a chess game when you're talking about like managing, specifically like client relationship in a consulting environment.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, like in this conversation, we're going to be talking about building relationships versus burning bridges as well. And burning a bridge can really, really hurt you. And it can hurt your business. It can hurt your, your credibility or integrity, everything like that. And so it's always good to know how to continue holding together a relationship, especially the way you guys handle things here at Greencastle. And I definitely wanted to get to talk to you because you've got a lot of, Jeremy, you've got a lot of client relationship expertise, having worked here for as long as you have doing that, and as well as you as well, Eric, because you guys are in the forefront. You're on the SLT, so you're in front of the client a lot. So thank you for being on the show, for one.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. And give us your wisdom. Let our audience know, what does it take to build a strong relationship with a client?
Wow, that's a lot to unpack. That's multifaceted. I think the number one thing is to genuinely have their best interest in mind. There's a lot of tools, tactics, techniques, to apply to that on the periphery, but genuinely having their best interest in mind shines through. Yeah.
I mean, having their best interest obviously is the key. But I think also there's a value to understanding who your client is and trying to match them in some way, or at least try to come together with some kind of common thread of some sort, like being, I don't know, you've talked about this in some of our meetings before, where it's like you're not just trying to build a relationship, you're trying to build like almost a family.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, to Eric's point, genuine commitment to client success. That's one of our key behaviors, here at the company. And That's what makes us different from a lot of our competitors is we truly care about their success.
Yeah.
Right? It's the revenue is not the priority. It's their success is the priority because that is going to lead eventually to higher revenue as a company, right?
Yeah.
So prioritizing that commitment to their success, that inherently is going to be Greencastle's success. So
Right.
we recognize that. We made it one of our core values or in our behaviors. So that means something to us. From a going in and solving problem perspective, that's what we do. That's our service offering. We take their problems and we break them down and we help them solve those problems. A lot of what I did before coming to Greencastle, I was a police officer. Every call was different, dozens potentially a day. Every problem was different, and I had to figure out how to solve all those problems. And I had to figure out how to solve it in the best light that person isn't mad, upset, angry with me, and how I handled it, how I handled the problem solving every time, right? Because otherwise it results in, it's an indication that our agency is not good. It's a complaint to the front desk. They want a supervisor. So in order to avoid all that, I had to make sure it was the best possible outcome it could be for, in that case, the client, right? The one I'm trying to solve the problem for. So I learned how to do that at a street level, with the general public. And, I brought those skills to Greencastle, and people like Eric and Joe and some of the other senior leaders of the company helped me refine that into dealing in corporate relationships and in executive level relationships. And, it's a work in progress. I still need to work on the polish and all that stuff. But, I've definitely come a long way. Since 1990 or 2019. So I've come a long way since then. And I'm working on it every day. And I love just going out there and just talking to clients and hearing what their problems are, and just being like, you know what, I have a perfect solution. A great example was we were talking to a client down in Orlando, and at the conference, and they had brought up that they were having a really hard time wrangling in their project financials, right? And how to really effectively capture them, report on them, forecast them. Well, with Eric, the godfather of that service offering for Greencastle, and it was a no-brainer to kind of hook that up and make that connection and be able to say, hey, look, we have things that can solve this problem for you. And they immediately wanted to set up a call with a demo. So that's just one of and that made me feel good, right? And obviously it's a bit of it's a lot of satisfaction for us because it's something we do it very well, we do it better than anyone else. And this client just happened to bring up that they had a need for it, and it was because of that trust, mutual trust and respect, that we were able to lock it in and set up a demo.
So Jeremy's very humble, but he is a total natural and very effective at developing relationships consistently. I think everybody in the world develops some relationships less consistently. I think what it comes down to, besides just genuinely having someone's best interest in mind, is everyone, given their age, their culture, their experience, you name it, everyone has a different preferred way of interacting.
Right.
And we all have a default mode, and sometimes you get lucky and that connects. But to be able to assess what that is and kind of adjust your approach and respond to that, I think possibly that comes from, like Jeremy was saying, his police background, but he is a total expert at just morphing his demeanor. Sometimes someone needs stern, confident guidance. Sometimes people need a sounding board, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes they need a sympathetic shoulder to cry on, right? Creative problem solving, mutual, right? It's different for every person. Do they want face-to-face interaction? Do they want to be over the phone? Do they want an email? Do they want a lot? Do they want it all consolidated? So Jeremy doesn't even think about it; it just comes natural to him. But that's I think a skill set that he maybe inadvertently or advertently developed over time. But definitely something for everyone to keep in mind if you want to consistently build relationships with whoever you meet.
That's great. Yeah.
Thanks, Eric.
There's so I know the audience out here is probably trying to figure this out themselves. If you're trying to build relationships, how important is that first impression?
I think the obvious answer is it's extremely important, and I think particularly so if we're saying in the context of consulting or professional services. It is not the end-all, be-all. You can change it, but it acts as an initial, very deeply seated, heavy anchor point, right?
Right,
It takes
right.
a long time and a lot of effort to move it from there. And I think what's particularly important in some kind of consulting or professional services is if that comes out off the bat not as strong as it should be, you might not be given enough time or have enough effective effort to move it, right? It
Right,
might get cut
right.
off at some point. So it's really important to start off strong and obviously to maintain it. You don't get to ride those coattails forever. If you
Right.
slack off from there, it'll eventually drag. But to have a strong starting point is what gives you the bandwidth and ability to continue to build that relationship over time.
Nice.
I've learned in the beginning of a relationship, that first impression, listen more than you talk. Listen more than you talk, because you're more apt to put your foot in your mouth and make a really bad impression before you know enough,
Right.
than to have them think, wow, they're not really talking. That's a horrible impression. That doesn't happen very often. But putting your foot in your mouth does, because you haven't had a chance to get to know who they are, to be able to even know what a good impression would be.
Right.
Right. So,
Great point.
And you can't be totally silent. Listen more
Correct.
than you talk.
Yeah.
I
Right.
think that the follow-on is when you talk, ask more questions than the statements that you make.
Right.
And the two of those things, the listening and the asking questions, is what's going to really rapidly develop your read on what is this person's preferences in terms of communication style.
That comes into active listening, and also putting questions out. That lets them know that you're actually listening to them at the same time, which is nice.
yeah, there was a business development book I read. I can't remember what the name of it was off the top of my head. But they said the most successful business development folks ask on average 30 questions, where the least successful ask 6 or 8 or something like that. So the point being, the more you ask questions, the more you're kind of narrowing down what those important things are to that person. And it could be business development questions, or it could be, where were you born?
Yep.
What's your favorite food?
Yeah.
Right. So you can cater those questions to whether you're trying to conduct business development or you're just trying to get to know somebody. And quite often, being able to tell what they want or what their priority for the conversation or the relationship is, that's how you customize that.
Yeah.
So just trying to find that key question or answer that you're looking for from that person. If I ask somebody where they were born and they immediately go into, this is the project I'm working on. All right, well, I understand now.
Yeah.
They don't want me to ask more personal questions. I'm going to now gear this. They want to get down to business. Let's go. Let's do this.
But I would say also, and we almost hit on this in the very beginning, more of the tactics and techniques part of developing relationships.
Yeah.
It's when it's very early on, finding a common ground. There is commonality between any two people on this earth,
Yeah.
and finding what it is just an initial boost to that relationship. It gets it going in the right direction very quickly. And so, including, obviously you want to know, why is this project is important? What's the value? What kind of issues is the team running into? But going a little bit on that personal side and finding those personal connection points is also going to be something that just gets the ball rolling.
Yeah. That's good.
It's like, it's a very you're trying to communicate almost like what value you can provide to that person without like selling anything to them. So like you say, 30 questions, right? 30 questions makes them think like, wow, Jeremy's really interested in me and my problems,
Right.
versus like, Jeremy's really interested in selling me Greencastle. Like
Right.
that's the
Right.
whole wrong way of approaching it, I think. In the
But to add on top of that, RJ, being genuine about that, that's the key.
Yep.
Yeah, that's
Right?
the key.
That's the key. If you're not genuine about doing that, and you're coming off as the used car salesman, no offense to any used car salesmen out there, but
Sure, there's great ones out there.
I'm sure there is. But if you're coming off that way, like they're gonna know it.
It shines
so
through. It reeks through.
You need to be genuinely committed and concerned about what their problems are.
Yeah.
Right. And we are, and that's what makes Greencastle different. Is we care about that.
Yeah.
like almost to an unhealthy level. Like I never thought, like I spent a little bit of time as a consultant. I never thought I'd be as invested in like a Fortune 500 project that like effectively like, I don't have like a significant emotional attachment to, and all of a sudden I'm like, man, I'm losing like sleep over this thing.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
And the success of it, and it's transitioned obviously over now. But it's very, very interesting. Like there's a true like care, because you had like a human dimension to it. 'Cause that's at the end of the day, they're not projects. It's like it's a team of people that are
Right.
struggling to do something, and you just don't want to see that.
Yep.
In that same vein, how does a person like yourself inadvertently burn a bridge?
Breaking that trust is probably the easiest way to burn that bridge, right? Because over time you develop trust with whoever you're working with and whatever client you have, and they begin to let down their guard and take a lot more for granted. And when you burn that, when you break that trust, that's really hard to get back. It takes a lifetime to build trust. It takes an instant to lose it. So being very deliberate and very aware of everything you're doing and whatever those ramifications could potentially be, you always have to be reassessing that, always, especially with huge decisions that have outward-facing results.
Right.
I think breaking trust really can come in two different flavors as well. There's one's probably more obvious than the other to folks, but you could maybe this person shared a personal secret with you and you shared it outward. Like that's an obvious personal breach of trust.
Right.
But there's also the professional, which I would say is more of an accountability thing, but those two overlap heavily, right?
They do.
If you're just not delivering what you need to on time at the right level of quality, if you're the one dragging the project down, that's a different form of trust that also leads to burn bridges.
Right, right. Yeah, that's important. Mentioning accountability, that definitely comes into play with the health of the client relationship. What issues in accountability come up when it comes to maybe say, you're the right person for the job, but maybe the job keeps shifting things, like
you just described all of the engagements.
And
projects
a lot of that happens when you're consulting, that things can change like rapidly. So how do you maintain that and maintain your integrity and your accountability with that client so that you're maintaining the bridge?
Yeah, for me, it's about aligning expectations consistently and often, right? Because if you have a shared expectation of what the outcomes look like, who's accountable for what, and you're consistently and frequently communicating that, those are all, ways to avoid any kind of accountability issues. And then just doing what you say you're going to do, right? If there are expectations that you haven't discussed, that's a problem, right, on either side. Right. Because I don't want to have an ill will feeling toward a client, and I don't want them to have that towards me. Well, what's going to cause that? Missed expectations is what's going to cause that.
Right.
They're not expecting a Christmas card from me, but they are expecting a deliverable.
Yeah.
Right. And if we're not aligned on when that deliverable is supposed to be there and what's supposed to be in it, if we're not aligned there, well, that's going to become an issue one way or the other. Right. So that's huge.
So nobody's perfect, right? But if you've got 100 opportunities to deliver something on time the way you said you would, right? Do what you say and say what you do. It is important to do 99 of those times, the way you said you would. And for the one or two out there that you can't hit, proactively communicating ahead of time, like, hey, just had a family emergency, I'm not going to be able to, don't just let that deadline pass and hope nobody notices.
Yeah.
And also say, I'm so sorry this came up. Can't get it done by this date, but I can get it done by the next day by 3 p.m. And then you better make sure that you hit that one.
Yeah. It's interesting. I was having a conversation before we started this podcast with one of the skill bridgers out there, and I was talking about how I hired a college student to work on a project for me for a sci-fi story that I'm working on, and I asked her to send me an itemized list of what I'm paying for, and she gave me something that was just really it didn't make any sense. This is the value just wasn't there, and so I needed to break that relationship off. She ghosted me, so it's like for me that's a bridge burn. I'm not going to go back to you ever for anything, even though you have a skill set that I can use. Because of that, I can't work with you. And how do you deal with that kind of that type of relationship? Because we haven't gotten into any conversations about ghosting before, but I think that's something that just happens a lot, especially in I guess it's more of a younger audience.
I think less than the ghosting is just by the very nature of the work we do. A lot of it's project based, projects end, and then if they're, I think in a perfect world, right, this isn't exactly advantageous to Greencastle, is we do such a good job on a project that clients so problem solved.
Right? So
we're good.
I got to interject there because that's something that comes up all the time in our line of work. Are you really going to work yourself out of a job?
Yeah.
The beautiful reality is no person or organization has ever solved all of their problems
Yep.
and achieved all of their opportunities. And so the faster and more effective we can help them solve their problems or achieve those opportunities just opens up their bandwidth and ability to solve more problems or take on more
True.
opportunities.
True.
And who are they going to look to for help?
Exactly.
More than the people who helped them before.
Yeah, I love that
sense.
you like that we've positioned it that way. Just because I do think that's one of the common like stigmas per se associated with like some other consulting firms where it's like they're either like they're straight to the letter of the SOW and then gone, or they're like why are there more problems all of a sudden that we can pay you to solve? But it's not like that. It's the reality is like, hey, we had a great relationship and I am invested in seeing you be successful. We were successful here. I think I can help you be successful here as well.
Yeah.
I challenge you
Yeah.
to find a Fortune 500 company's quarterly earnings report where the CEO says, biggest strategic priorities, no, we're good. Steady as she goes. No issues, no risks, no opportunities.
Right.
Just keep going.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
It's never the case.
Yeah.
So,
sorry.
go ahead.
No, I was going to say maintaining the relationships that we've had, right? So,
Yeah.
you know, clients that we've done work for that the work ends. You know, RJ, one of your former clients is a perfect example.
Yep.
The work ended. Months went by. They didn't need work done by us yet. And then they came back to us and they said, all right, hey, we want what RJ did.
Yeah.
Right.
Nice.
And you weren't available. So, you know, we put somebody else into that role and they're crushing it. Right.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's one example. But, you know, making sure that you stay in contact, I enjoy that.
Yeah.
I enjoy reaching out to former clients or former folks that I've worked with that we no longer work with and just keeping a friendship going because I consider them friends at this point. There's some clients I'm friends with on social, right? So, you know, and that's okay. You know, it's okay to have that relationship because we all live the same values. We can have those individual relationships, but at the end of the day, they're going to say, "Hey, I want to work with you again."
Yep.
Yeah.
You know, when they have the opportunity, when they have those, you know, strategic initiatives that they need to execute, they're going to call us, because they know that we're the best at it.
And a certain level of relationship development is somewhat automatic, you know, when you have that ongoing face-to-face relationship, as long as you're not a huge jerk anyway.
Yeah.
But the converse is true, right? If that project ends and there's no natural touch points, that relationship's naturally going to start to fade. And that's where being intentional and continuing to reach out, showing someone that you're thinking of them, have their best interest in mind, maybe get together, that's what keeps you top of mind to get that call back later on.
Yeah, and you know, I worked for a general in the Army. He always said, everybody has to eat. Why not make it a meeting? So there was many a days where, you know, we were summoned to a meal with the good general. So it was but he's right.
Yeah.
You know, if I'd walk into a chow hall as a veteran and I'd see a soldier sitting there eating, I would go sit down next to that person and eat with them.
Yeah.
I might not even know who they are.
Yeah.
You know, but it's a cool way because you both are eating. Why not have a conversation?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so a lot of the times with clients, I'll do that. You know, say, oh, I haven't talked to so-and-so in a while. Let's see if they want to grab lunch. You know, and we'll catch up, and I might not talk to them again for 6 months.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's just a good way just to rekindle old friendships and talk about the successes you shared and sometimes even the failures you've shared, you know, and it's just a good way to keep relationships moving along, you know.
Nice.
Yeah. I have a bit of a hot take. Maybe it's not a hot take. I'd love to be, if it is, I'd love to be corrected. But at least I honestly feel like this in a professional and a personal setting, like I don't think I actually believe, and maybe in the rare cases of like extremely illegal activity, in burning bridges. Like I think there are just like folks are in different phases of their personal and professional life, and you know, sometimes those align with who I am or what I'm trying to do, and sometimes they don't. But burning the bridge to that relationship never seems like an option to me. I'm like I'm always going to try to preserve something of a relationship that can be mended or improved upon.
And I think to a large degree, no relationship really is ever completely beyond repair.
Yeah.
Certainly, though, what leads up to what we'd call a burn bridge might dictate the amount of time or effort to repair that for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think everything in over time and with the right amount of effort could be repaired. Now, the question is, do you want to repair that? Depends. Are you the ghoster or the ghostee, right?
Yeah.
If you're the ghostee, yeah, it could be repaired if they, you know, apologize and put forth the effort, but I'm not going to, you know. There's enough other people in the world, but if you've done wrong, if you're the bridge burner, it's not easy, right? And it's not fast either, but it is possible and probably the right thing to do.
And so in that vein, you're saying like own up to your responsibility. Say you are the bridge burner. Own up. What would you say? Own up to your responsibility.
Absolutely.
Apologize if necessary in that situation, whatever that situation might have been, and offer something. I would say, like
Offer a commitment more than anything, and then follow through with it.
Yeah. I've had clients in my personal business from the past where mistakes have been made. Maybe files were lost or something like that. And to make that relationship back up again, I offered stuff. I made my apologies. Hey, let's do this. We'll do this, no charge. Make sure that this is taken care of for you, so that it's covered. Things like that. It's hard to take a hit to your integrity, to your personal, integrity for what you're capable of, but I think it helps you grow as an individual, as a person, as a business, when you can hold yourself responsible for those type of situations, I think.
Yeah, and there is one more piece that kind of goes in the middle of this. That is kind of calling yourself out, holding yourself accountable, admitting it, apologizing, maybe offering something up or saying it won't happen again, right?
Yeah.
The commitment. But in between there, you have to do an internal analysis and then share it with the person you offended and say, I looked at what led up to this. How did I miss that deadline? What caused me to say that offensive thing? Whatever it might be. This is what led into that. And here is how I figured out the controls I'm going to put in place that's going to ensure that doesn't happen again.
That's good. Yeah, because then that shows that you've thought about it. You've built a force field around it now. Like it shows that you've got it under control. That's not going to happen again.
It's what makes that commitment believable and builds the belief and desire for the other person to say, okay, let's give this another shot. Right?
Yeah.
If you just say, hey, it won't happen again, it's like fool me once, fool me twice.
Exactly right. Yeah. There's nothing actionable for that. You're not saying like, oh, here's how I made that mistake. Here's how I'm going to do better now from now on. Moving forward. That's good. How do you feel like emotional empathy, emotional intelligence plays in preventing misunderstandings?
Oh, it's huge.
Yeah.
I think having that emotional intelligence allows you to identify early if you're going down a wrong path with something, or if maybe that person isn't ready to receive that communication or whatever it is you're giving. Being able to identify it and then adjust quickly, right? So EQ to me is so important in relationship building, because you're ahead of the game. You're already thinking ahead. You're already thinking, all right, this conversation's going completely sideways. Knowing it's going sideways before they know it's going sideways is the key to building that effective long-term relationship. But more importantly, the long-term relationship, managing that, knowing that, all right, this person doesn't like to be communicated with more than once a month, right? I don't want to annoy them. I don't want to ask stupid questions. Like, what kind of questions should I ask, right? Just having already that knowledge of what's a good approach, what's going to make somebody laugh, what's going to make somebody feel good about themselves, and knowing how to do that in a non-cheesy way, right? In a genuine way, in a way that you truly want to see them happy or successful, or actually enjoy the relationship. To me, that is so important. And EQ plays a huge role in that. If you look across Greencastle, the most successful folks have that high EQ. They have those strong relationships with the clients and fellow GACers. They have folks that they socialize with on the regular, and they're actually truly happy to do that. So that's a big factor.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it works, at the acute individual event level, but also on the longer scale as well. Like if you've got good EQ and can read the room and read people, maybe in an individual meeting, you can diffuse something where two other folks are at each other's throats and it's about to go up in flames, and you can kind of assess what needs to be said there. But there's also something broader that we preach, which is really learning to know your clients, how their overall motivations and personalities are, right? And so you could say, hey, to build a relationship, I'm going to celebrate this person. I'm going to tell their boss or their boss's boss what an awesome job they're doing. Sounds like it makes a lot of sense, right? But if you use your EQ, in this case, that person wants to fly under the radar, wants to prioritize work-life balance, is just looking to stay off of anybody's radar until they retire next year.
Yeah.
And so you're doing the exact opposite in that case, right? So the reading of the room and the reading of people, applies both in the individual moment, but also at the overall personality level.
Wow. I think the last thing that I want to get into, unless you have anything extra, is when a relationship is burned, how do you adjust from that? So if an audience member out here is like, I just completely screwed the pooch, I don't know what I can do to repair this relationship, what kind of advice would you give a person like that that's in that situation right now?
Well, my piece of advice would be weigh the importance of that relationship to you, right? Because if it's burned that bad, you're going to need to put a lot of effort into repairing that relationship. If it's something that you truly desire to salvage, whether it be from a personal perspective or a business development perspective, create a strategy around how to do that, right? Kind of back yourself into how they're feeling and what they're thinking, and view it through their eyes and say, all right, this is how I made them feel, or this is what I did to make them feel that way, and then develop a strategy around how to kind of show more value than what you've lost, right? And that strategy could be a million different things based on the scenario or the context of it, but really plan on how to engage that. I know if I've burned a bridge with a client, I'll say from a business perspective, what opportunity would I have to provide them value? What would they perceive as valuable from me? Me owning it? Absolutely. Right? Me making it right? Absolutely. That might only get me halfway back.
Yeah.
Right? How do I get that other half? Right? Maybe it's, attending a conference they're going to and purposely sitting next to them just to make small talk. Or maybe it's, strategically taking them out to lunch with me and some of the other folks they work with or something, right? Something to get an opportunity to kind of show them that, I'm making an effort to gain back their trust or gain back the relationship, and I'm still interested in it, and bringing up the good times, bringing up the things that went well. Because like I said, it takes a lifetime to build trust and an instant to lose it. So, if I lost that trust in that instant, it's going to take a while to build that back, but you need the opportunities to build it back. If you don't have those opportunities, it's going to take forever.
And it might be that you're not going to get those opportunities until time heals some wounds. But I do think if you're in that situation where there's just no repairing it right now, there probably is at least one good tactic to minimize the amount of time that's going to be required before you might be able to start to rebuild that. And that would be go out on a high note in the sense that own up to what you did. Say, hey, I understand I screwed this up. You probably have no interest in talking to me anymore, and I don't blame you, right? It's all my fault. Yeah. But just know that I understand what I did. I've learned a lot from it, and if there's ever an opportunity to talk again, I'll be here for you, right?
Yeah.
And don't expect that they're going to say, you know what, let's go out to lunch. Let's talk about it, right? Let them be mad, but let them know that as they cool off and reflect later, that you've learned from it.
Yeah. That's important. We've talked about leadership on the show all the time, and a lot of the people that are on the show that talk about leadership is they like to say, learn from your mistakes. Making mistakes actually makes you stronger, because you're learning from those mistakes as long as you're doing it right. Doing it right means you're learning from it, and you're evolving and you're expanding from that. So that's great advice. Is there anything else about relationship building or anything like that you want to give out to the audience that might be a good point?
Being self-aware. If there was one thing I had to say, is the most important, it's be self-aware. Understand what you're doing, how it's making somebody else feel, and be hypersensitive to that.
Yeah.
Because if you can be comfortable with that, I won't say master it because I don't think it can ever be mastered, but if you become very efficient, proficient in that skill, it's going to make everything else just come naturally. I don't train myself on how to do it. It's just something that I'm aware of, and I think as long as you're self-aware, you're just naturally going to keep improving.
Yeah. Right.
Because you're learning from yourself, and how you're making people feel. So there's never an interaction I go into that I don't analyze later. Like, what could I have said differently, or what did they mean by saying this? Like,
Yep.
what did I say to make them react that way? Whether good, bad, or ugly, I want to know the answer to that, because it allows me to be more effective when I'm communicating with people.
Nice.
Yeah.
Are there any resources, books, websites, anything like that people might be able to jump into to help them kind of figure out how to develop?
Yeah, I would say the book that springs to my mind isn't explicitly about relationship development, but it really gives you a mindset that will naturally lead to very strong relationships. It's called The Go-Giver. So it's kind of a play on the term go-getter, but it's a go-giver. And it's about how you should seek to add value to other people's lives first instead of looking what's in it for you, and how just kind of cosmic, karmic universe, how that is actually the thing that will benefit you the most in the long run.
Nice.
Yeah, I think it's one of the best skills you can invest in personally, like in terms of professional and personal development.
Yeah.
Like technical expertise there's a certain level you need of it to be, considered for stuff like this, but pleasant people that like can manage a relationship effectively, like people just want to work with them. No one's like, wow, RJ's really good at Excel, but he is an ass. Like I don't want to, I'm not going to get much work done in that environment. So.
Exactly right. Yeah. No, great points.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for breaking that down for us today. I think it's a great conversation, especially audience out there. If you guys, anything you want to take away from this, you got the book that you just recommended. Make sure you check out Greencastle website as well, because there's a lot of good resources out there, especially if you're looking at consulting, anything like that. So I guess that's
Hey, thanks for tuning in.
That's
for
it.
this episode.
Thanks
for
Eric, Jeremy, thanks
for having us.
Yeah,
All right,
cheers.
awesome.
Yeah.
All right, great guys. Thanks.
Thanks.